Hey, welcome in everybody to this episode of the Flagship podcast. I am Chip Brown of Horns247.com, joined as always by my esteemed colleague and proud Tampa Catholic graduate, the one and only Eric Henry of Horns247.com. And Eric, we are 6 practices into training camp for the Texas Longhorns, the preseason number 1 Texas Longhorns, according to the coaches poll. And believe it or not, this is the first time Texas has ever been a preseason number 1, a program that has is top 5 all time in wins in college football. First time ever preseason number 1. Not sure it's a distinction you want, because the preseason number 1 has not finished number 1 in 19 of the last 20 years. So I don't know how much time we'll spend on that, but Eric, your I'll ask you your thoughts on Texas being preseason number 1.
Good morning, Chip Brown. Happy Wednesday morning. Appreciate everyone watching on YouTube, on Twitter. Quick announcement: I'll get Facebook up and running again. Just bring inside baseball. These things, the permissions kind of cycle through every 30 days. So for those of you who typically watch on Facebook, I will get that up and running by the end of the week. To Chip's question, what do I think about Texas being the preseason number 1 in the coaches poll? I wrote about it in my 4 Downs column. Cheap plug there. Go check it out. Available this morning, horns247.com.
That's right. And take advantage of our 50% off annual membership. 50% off becoming an annual member. You want to become an annual member because then you get VIP access to all the sites, team sites on the preeminent 24/7 sports network. And you get to read Eric's 4 Downs column. Continue, my friend.
Chip, before I continue, why don't we take a second here? Chip, why don't you tell them why this is the best time of the year, or one of the best times of the year, to sign up for an annual VIP membership? Because you're getting camp intel not only from us, Chip, but from the entire network, my friend.
That's right. So if you want to know what's going on at Ohio State's training camp, become an annual member so that you can get all the VIP intel on the Buckeyes or the Georgia Bulldogs or the Florida Gators. So yes, this is the time. Has there ever been any more excitement, for crying out loud? Texas is the preseason number 1 team, whether they like it or not. I mean, people think they have a chance to win the national championship, Eric.
There you go. So with that out of the way, yeah, I wrote about it in my 4 Downs column. Who cares, right? You nailed it, right? 19 of the last 20 teams to earn the preseason number 1 ranking did not finish number 1. It's all about finishing the season atop the mountain. You know what stood out to me, Chip, and maybe this has more to do with us than anything else. Chip, you've been on this beat for a long time. I won't say how long, but you mentioned it during our introductory to Sean Miller. So those of us who were there know. I shouldn't say introductory to Sean Miller, but our availability with Sean Miller. Chip, this is the POV I took, and I'm curious your thoughts here. I didn't realize just how bad the decade of the 2010s was for Texas football. 78-73 from 2010 to 2020. When Texas was ranked or named as the number 1 team in the nation last year, Chip, if you remember, that was leading into the Georgia game, right? Because there had been some teams were knocked off at the top, and Texas earned the number 1 ranking, right? It was this story. It was, man, Texas is ranked number 1 for the first time since, if my memory serves me correct, entering the Texas Tech game in 2008. Of course, we know what happened there, right? So, yeah, it was a question that reporters asked, Steve Sarkisian asked the players. This time around, nobody asked. And to me, I think that's kind of emblematic of kind of the attitude around, this distinction. The expectations are there, right? It's not like last year where it's like, man, Texas is still clawing their way back. And of course, we knew it was a great team, right? Or knew it would end up being a great team. But that felt like more of maybe achievement's not the right word, but more noteworthy that Texas had finally become number one again, as opposed to this time around. Sure, first time in program history, I guess that's something. It honestly caught me by surprise that Texas had never been the preseason number one in the storied history of this program. But that's the big takeaway for me, is that no one made a thing of it. Steve Sarkisian didn't mention it. He wasn't asked about it because the expectations are there.
Yeah. It's, no one's even talking about, is Texas back? Because they know Texas is back to back college football playoff semifinals. That the only team with that distinction right now in college football. So yeah, it is. It's interesting. You look back 6-7 years from right now, and we'll talk about the position. We can get into that now too. The position versatility, flexibility on this team, the fact that you can move a Trey Moore, who started 600, played 647 snaps last year at defensive end at the Buck defensive end position for Texas, and now you're moving him to linebacker because he needs to show the NFL he can play another position. Jalen Gilbo goes to his coaches and says, I want to play outside corner instead of nickel. So they move him there in the spring. He's still there at outside corner, much like Jahdae Barron last year, who moved to outside corner, collected a team lead tying 5 interceptions in the Thorpe Award, and became a first-round pick, 20th overall by the Denver Broncos. Like, to go back 6-7 years, that this would have been unheard of. You would have been, first of all, Texas didn't have the depth to be able to pull that off, nor the talent, Eric. These are days I say to Texas fans all the time, enjoy these days, savor these days. Go to the Texas OU game this year if you've never been. Soak it up, because you don't know how long you'll have it. These windows are, we're not going to see a 17-year window like Alabama under Nick Saban. That was unheard of. It was amazing. And Texas fans are sort of reaping the benefit of Steve Sarkisian having been with Nick Saban, because I always say this, he obviously took very good notes, Eric, while he was in Tuscaloosa. But these are different days. These are special days. So we, got woken up by the now confirmed season-ending knee injury to right tackle Andre Kojo. That obviously was the big news coming out of the weekend. And Eric, you wrote about it. Andre Kojo now out for the season. Brandon Baker, the sophomore, was battling with Andre Kojo to be the right tackle. You got to think Brandon Baker is now going to be the guy, but this impacts the depth, Eric. And you asked Steve Sarkisian, hey, you going to look in the portal? And what he said?
Listen, shall I give Steve's answer? He said no, and that they'd have a better chance going to the CoOp to find a tackle than going to the portal, which, Chip, in an effort, in the interest of transparency, as someone who was not a UT grad, I did not know what the CoOp was. I got the gist of it in real time. I had to ask around to ask what exactly the CoOp was. I got the gist of it in real time, Steve. No, listen, he flatly, emphatically shut that down. And I'm not gonna lie, Chip, I kind of like that answer. The player's perspective of me likes that answer, because it shows that you have confidence in your guys. Right? This isn't a situation where last year you lose multiple backs, right? And then it's like, man, because you have to look at it this way. And I understand Steve's perspective, but the question still had to be asked, right? But you got to look at it this way with running back. Not only are you losing someone who possibly could contribute in terms of CJ Baxter, and Christian Clark, I guess in this example, I'm talking about Christian when I say possibly contribute in the backfield. You're losing a body on special teams and different facets, right? Whereas in this case, yeah, I guess the loser of that right tackle battle still going to be a rotational piece. Possibly, maybe is a tackle on kick on field goal kick and punt protection, things of that nature. But for the most part, when you lose just one tackle, not like two or three, it's not crucial that like just for the sheer purposes we need a body. How is the trickle down effect going to be on teams and so on and so forth? You don't have that issue at hand here. The other thing, like I said, I think it shows confidence in the guys that you've recruited that, hey, we're not just going to go get someone out of the portal. We're not going to panic. We recruited you. We've been developing you. Here is your time. Next man up, step in and fill in that role. Right now, the reason why I thought it was pertinent to ask Chip is just the aspect of youth, right? You only have of the players who are slated to be reserves, right? Of course, nothing's official yet. The players who are slated to be reserves, you only have one upperclassman back there in Connor Robertson who will be a reserve, right? And I'm sure if I explained this reason to Steve Sarkisian, he probably would say, well, yeah, isn't that what you want? I expect to develop my upperclassmen to be starters. And of course, I'm only going to have reserves who are underclassmen, right? That would be a fair response. But for the sake of the fact that his own words, you have inexperience on the offensive line, I felt it was worth kicking around and saying, hey, maybe is it worth bringing in a guy who's played, a little bit of football, whether as a reserve or someone's had a handful of starts. The same rationale as bringing in Matthew Caldwell, right? Maybe that's worth, kicking the tires on someone. But like I said, understand Steve's answer, appreciate Steve's answer. And I think it shows real confidence in his guys, Chip. What says you?
Yeah, and I think you have a guy like Jaden Chapman who can play both guard and tackle. You obviously have a big-time freshman talent in Nick Brooks, and you just brought the Coleman twins onto the campus, and so they're gonna develop their guys, and you're knocking on wood if you're a Texas fan that you don't take any more hits on the offensive line, because that is as you mentioned, Steve Sarkisian, he's not calling his team young. He's calling them inexperienced at certain positions, because there are guys, as you pointed out, who've been in the program for a while. A guy like Neto Umazulu, who is in his fourth year and is finally getting to start. And so it does show confidence. They've never gone to the portal for an offensive lineman in Steve Sarkisian's now going on 5 years. He and Kyle Flood have done a really good job of identifying talent, developing talent. And I always remind Texas fans when they get a little bit, lost in the stars, Trevor Gooseby was a 3-star out of Melissa. That was a great job of evaluating talent, developing talent, and now Trevor Gooseby is being sent out to talk to us, Eric. When players start showing up for media availability, that in itself is a note, because it means the coaches trust those players to speak on behalf of the team or speak on behalf of themselves as a member of the team. And so Trevor Gooseby is now coming to media availabilities, and that's a positive sign that they believe in Trevor Gooseby, not only as a player, but as a spokesman, leader. And so, yeah, that's going to be a story to watch for sure, because the offensive line already was a story to watch as 4 starters get replaced. And obviously you have a new quarterback. You've got a couple receivers who return, obviously, and we'll get to Ryan Wingo's, missing a few days of camp for personal reasons.
Chip, real quick, do you mind if I ask you, your thought super quick? Just like I said, I appreciated Steve's answer, and I understand it from a morale perspective and having faith in your guys. Do you think just in a season where you don't want to leave any stone unturned, that is, I don't want to say the right decision, but the decision to not go to the portal for a tackle, And of course, let's put the scholarship thing aside for a second, right? Because some people noted, oh, well, where's Texas at scholarship wise? I hate to say it this flippantly. You can find a way to manipulate the scholarships or get someone in there, even if it's as a walk. You can find a way to manipulate that. So put that aside, Chip. Do you see it the same way?
Yeah, I do. I mean, I think they feel good about guys like Jaden Chapman, and I wouldn't be surprised to see Jaden move to tackle full time. They like Nate Kibble, they like Connor Stroh at guard. So, they've got guys that I think they feel good about. And those guys probably need the work. And you and I both know if they can get through Ohio State, there's 3 games right there where a lot of guys are going to get a lot of opportunity to show that they can be trusted going into conference play. So I think it's the right move. I mean, I'm not in practice every day. I'm not in the offensive line meeting rooms, but I think it's a vote of confidence. We've seen, guys like Kibble and Stroh change their bodies to give themselves an opportunity. They're still engaged. They're still fighting to get on the field. And I like that the coaches are going to reward those guys with that opportunity if it presents itself. So, yeah, Eric, the other notable, DJ Campbell missed a practice that we were allowed to see some of, and Ryan Wingo. I'm not concerned at this point, but the fact that Ryan Wingo missed some time in the spring with the hamstring injury, I need Ryan Wingo in practice. I need him to be present. I need his personality. I need his energy and charisma in practice. What say you?
Yes, for the reasons you mentioned, but I'll go one step further. While I am a big believer in Ryan Wingo, and I'll say this line again because, quite frankly, it's my favorite line. I'm going to say it until it comes true because I know it's going to come true. If Ryan Wingo had the same amount of targets as Jeremiah Smith or Ryan Williams, we'd be talking about him in that conversation. But not even just from the perspective you mentioned. How about he's still a young, growing player, right? And listen, missing 2-3 practices, it's not the end of the world, right? Wingo's been working with Arch in the offseason. He's been busting his butt, putting in the work. And, by all means, you feel confident Ryan Wingo's not just missing practice just for the missed practice, right? So there's a reason he's out. And, let's hope that, all the things, whatever it may be, he's back, right? But just from his own development, Chip, that's why I would love to have him out there is every rep, like I said, you don't want to leave any stone unturned entering a season in which you legitimately feel Texas can bring a national title back to the 40 acres for the first time in 20 years. No stone unturned. Chip, we'd feel the same way if this were Arch Manning missing, or at least I would feel the same way if it was Arch Manning missing, 2 or 3 practices. Just, you need him out there. Every rep counts.
Yeah, for sure. This is a guy who, as you mentioned, was talked about with Jeremiah Smith, Ryan Williams coming out last year, but Ryan Wingo had Matt Golden and Isaiah Bond ahead of him, and DeAndre Moore. So now is his time to shine, and he's a guy who's seen as just a massive ceiling guy. I mean, when Chris Jackson said that he runs 4.3 in the 40, I was like, okay, well then it's on. I mean, Ryan Wingo should have a ridiculous season this year because he's the guy who can take the top off the defense, big, strong, going over the middle, all the things. He's got the hands, the 6'2", 217, running 4.3. Come on. Yeah. The guy should be a star, and it should really show up this season. So these are important days They are, the summer is where you bond. Fall camp is where you start to put it all together, and you want guys who are with you side by side. And obviously Ryan Wingo's missing for personal reasons. Steve Sarkisian's not worried about it. So obviously there's a significant development going on in Ryan Wingo's life that he needs to tend to right now. Eric, let me get some of your early impressions from camp, because, what's your vibe? What's your sense of it? Where are you feeling good? Where are you feeling like it needs work?
Chip, I tried to, when I was thinking about this, tried to look back at the first camp I was here, right, 3 years ago, and the vibe feels different. And I don't even think that is a arch perspective or even a, preseason number one perspective coming off of two, CFP semifinal appearances. It's not even that. This is going to sound cliche, but I'm trying to give it to you guys with the freshest eyes that I have, having, going back to the first time I saw this team to now. From a talent perspective, a numbers perspective, a size perspective, a well-oiled machine perspective, for at least from what we're able to see, right? Because we only get a small little sliver. It just feels almost night and day. And again, I wasn't here for the 5 and 7 fall camp. I wasn't here for the 8 and 5 fall camp. But just trying to compare this to when I first got on the beat, that's the takeaway for me. It's with success comes confidence. With success comes expectations. But none of this feels too big. None of this feels like, okay, we're the proverbial running from expectations. All of it just feels like it's all coming together. And I know that's not necessarily the answer that, maybe you were intending or people were intending, right? So I'll try to give some impressions in terms of specific players. But the biggest takeaway, the overarching takeaway, is just the feel of practice. And I guess I led with that, Chip, because you're someone who can speak to the prior years, right? When there were expectations, maybe Texas 2019 coming off of the 2018-10 win year. I think that was 2019, if memory serves me correct.
Yeah.
Or, different points in times. This just feels different. So I'll stop there, and then maybe I'll come back with a couple players in a second. And you let me know if that's
I think that's right. And, it used to be that Texas fans would get excited. They would be able to point to a year when the maturity of the roster should indicate a conference title run. And then it would be a bridge year. But man, wait till 2018. And now it's every year. And that's why I say Texas fans enjoy this, because the momentum that Steve Sarkisian has generated in the program, his coaching staff, with the recruiting and the player development. Remember, this was a team that couldn't finish games in 2021. Now they have the longest winning streak in true road games in the nation at 11. That will obviously get tested in game 1 at Ohio State. The program's completely transformed the mindset of the program. You're hearing players say, we're tired of being in the CFP semifinals.
Right.
We're ready for the next step. Okay, well, that's what it takes. It's what it takes. You knock on the door, and then you kick it in. So yeah, I agree with you from that standpoint. What about players?
Yeah. I'll give you the first one that stands out to me. And again, maybe I'm projecting too much. Chip, Murad Watson and Cole Brevard. I know we talk a lot about Colin Simmons, and rightfully so, with that front four, right? I don't know how, kind of your sensibilities on this. As much as a dominant edge rusher can just take over a game, I think that interior defensive line to a pair of dominant defensive tackles, or even just one guy, but in this case, if you have two real standouts, they may not take over the game in the same way a edge rusher can, but boy, they can mess up a game for an opposing team. because he can't do anything up the middle. Your quarterback's getting harassed in his face. That takeaway, hearing Steve Sarkisian yesterday talk about Murad Watson and Cole Brevard, and we'd already heard about Cole, from Kenny Baker and so on and so forth. Folks, again, I'm not a big underwear Olympics guy, but Murad Watson, t-shirt and shorts, that dude looks like an NFL player at 20 years old, right? 19, 20 years old. So that to me is a big time takeaway in terms of a player and position. And then to go to the offensive side of the ball, I've talked a lot about Parker Livingstone and whatnot, but I just think the level of playmakers, Chip, that to me comes to mind. Most teams would kill for one or two guys on an offense that you can turn to and say, hey, let's get the ball in this guy's hands. Quintravion Weiser, and I know you're going to talk about his leadership and how he's emerged there. He obviously is a guy. The running back as a room as a whole. And we'll see how CJ Baxter comes along with the injury, but even guys behind him, Christian Clark, Jarrett Gibson, it just feels like it comes in waves, Chip. That to me stands out because I was asked this on a radio spot. I'll finish here and pass it back to you. I was asked on a radio spot, weaknesses on Texas's defense. I don't see any. I don't see any weak spots, quite frankly. And if you know that this defense is going to be there, if it's the type of defense, Chip, where just give us 14 points, right? And we know Texas is going to score more than 14 points, but just for the purposes of it, just give us 14 points. Just give us 17 points. That is a major thing to walk into any stadium in the nation with, Chip. So, yeah, in specificity, that interior defensive line, I feel like we'd harped on it a lot in terms of replacing the guys, but I don't know if we've talked about it enough. Maybe, just maybe, Chip, this group as a whole has a chance to be better because of the overall talent from 1 through 5, 1 through 6 in that spot. But then just overall, the offensive playmakers that I think will be there to, really supplement this team, for lack of a better word, I think it's huge.
Yeah, I agree with you on that interior defensive line position, because we said coming in, if these guys can stop the run, then it's going to be a nightmare for opposing offenses, because if they get you into 3rd and long or 3rd and obvious, they've got the guys who can get home. And this defense could be Georgia-esque 2021. We'll see. Now, those defenses were stacked with top NFL talent at the interior positions with, Devontae Wyatt and Jalen Carter. Bill Norton transferred because he couldn't get on the field at defensive tackle for those Georgia teams. But Texas has better edge presence in my mind than those Georgia teams. This Texas defense reminds me a little bit of the Will Anderson, Dallas Carter, or Dallas Turner,
yep.
Alabama defenses. And so we'll see. But this defense for Texas does have a chance to be dominant. And I expect that defense, if Texas is going to win in Columbus, Ohio, the Texas defense has to be dominant. And they have to carry this team or anchor this team until the offense can find its bearings, because it is going to take a minute. And yeah, I think it's a really good point by you, because what we're hearing from the coaches, I thought there might be some, we're trying to figure it out. They're talking about this may be the deepest they've ever been at defensive tackle.
Yeah.
Pete Kwiatkowski did not sound, he sounded, we're good. We like these guys. Steve Sarkisian, this could be the deepest we've been. We might be able to keep guys fresher.
Right.
We might not have to play guys as much as we played Alfred Collins and Vernon Broughton last year, so that late in the season we're fresh. That kind of talk is like, okay, well then there's doesn't sound like there's a ton to be concerned about from a defensive perspective at all. On the offensive side, I thought it was interesting. Steve Sarkisian yesterday was talking about we got to have some players let go of a bad play. And I was like, surely he's not talking about the quarterbacks, because that would be rough. And I don't think he was talking about Arch Manning. It sounded like it could have been the young receivers maybe, but he brought it up a couple times. He said, we got to have guys move on to the next play. I feel like we're letting one bad play kind of linger and lead to another bad play. So offensively, and Steve Sarkisian was the first one to point out, defense is always ahead of offense at this point.
Right.
So it sounds like there's work to be done on the offensive side in terms of identifying who what the roles are, Eric, because, okay, we know Jack Endries is probably going to be the first, the number one tight end. Okay, we know he can do all the things. He's smart. He knows how to get open against man, against zone. They like Emmett Mosley. They like DeAndre Moore. They like Ryan Wingo. They got to figure out the roles at the running back position. CJ Baxter, Steve Sarkisian keeps saying, we're going to go slow. We'll be on his clock. We got guys who can handle it till he's really good and comfortable. But, and everything I'm hearing about Arch Manning is he's in control of the offense. He's not guessing. He's making good decisions. But they've got, what did you make of Sarkisian's comment about, we got some players who need to let go of a play and move on?
Two things came to mind. One, it reminded me of an old saying a coach would say, progress over perfection, which, is this a great saying for life, right? Yes, you're striving for perfection, but progress, slow progress. This is what practice is for, right? It's the time to make mistakes. Don't get so bogged down in your mistake that it affects that next play mentality. The second thing that came to mind, and you kind of touched on it, is, well, you feel confident it's not Arch Manning. There's two spots on that offense where you got to have the next play mentality, in my opinion, is even heightened, Chip. It's quarterback, it's offensive line, right? We can work with the rest. Running back, I mean, as long as you're not, if it's a fumble, right, and you're so focused on the fumble, that's one thing. But if it's just, all right, you got stuff for a 1 yard loss, or maybe you missed a cut, we can work with that. A receiver, you run the wrong route, or maybe drop pass, we can work with that. Quarterback and offensive line, you have to have a next play mentality, because it can be catastrophic to the team. So those were the two things that came to mind there. Yeah, I would think that, and we're speculating here, it's not a guy like Quintravian Wisner. It's not a guy like a DeAndre Moore. Listen, Demo is dripping with confidence, right? I think Chip Brown touched on it in terms of him wanting everything. The Biletnikoff got that Cali swag. He's dripping with confidence. Emmett Mosley, we haven't had a chance to hear from him, but you feel confident in Emmett, right? And Ryan Wingo, of course, when he gets back out there on the practice field, you assume it's not him. So, yeah, I think your hunch would be correct. Maybe you have some young guys who it's their first fall camp, or their first real fall camp. Maybe if you're a redshirt freshman, or your first time really getting an opportunity to, hey, I'm being depended upon, right? And just to shuffle through the emotions and the things of that nature. If it's a Khalid Lockett or James Fridge, again, we're speculating. We don't know, who it is. One of the younger receivers, just put it past you. And as I said, we can work with it at running back and receiver. But if it's quarterback or offensive line, that can throw this whole thing in the tank.
Yeah. Like what Sarkisian said the other day about cornerbacks and tackles on the offensive line. When they make a mistake, it can be catastrophic. So there are some, inexperienced players on that offense who are going to be in some key roles. Eric, what when you talk about individual players who are standing out to you, maybe one on offense, one on defense so far in camp?
Yeah, listen, we've talked a ton about, Parker Livingstone, Grayson Littleton. I won't go that route. Let's start on the defensive side of the ball. someone who, from the time that, we've been out there, is really intriguing to me. Manny Muhammad, Chip. I feel like it's such a weird spot for Manny, right? A highly touted recruit. Obviously, he's been here a while, played a lot of football, played opposite of Jahdae Barron. Now he's the guy, right? And you're expecting that big leap. And it was, as you mentioned, as you said, rightfully so, defense is always usually ahead of offense at this point in the game. But to hear Steve Sarkisian say that Manny Muhammad picked off, or I guess he didn't say which quarterback, but picked off 2 passes in practice the other day. That to me is encouraging because, again, I just think, especially with Jalen Gilbo making that move to outside, you hope it works out as good as Jahdae Barron, but that can't be the expectation, right? I don't think we should get in the train of thought of believing the pathway to the Thorpe Award is star to outside quarter, right? Like, let's not make that a thing. So we'll see how that transition goes. I was impressed with Manny Muhammad. He stood out to me in camp. Even seen him do some of the little things, hearing him being vocal on teams. He's really stood out to me. On offense, you talked about it a little bit more. Trevor Gooseby, just the responsibility that they're giving him, not in terms of just talking to the media, but he's embracing Chip being the guy, right? And of course, I don't think it hurts when you come in to your first true season as a starter with the type of starts that he had under his belt, right? That certainly helps the confidence as well, that you can feel like, all right, I'm ready to be the guy. But he has stood out to me as well. And you talk about, again, just a true product, a true testament to player development, right? Coming in as a 3-star recruit, Kyle Flood works with him. He gets to learn, sit behind one of the best to ever do it. We use that phrase GOAT, flippantly nowadays. Kelvin Banks is in the GOAT discussion as far as the pantheon of Texas offensive linemen. He has stood out to me as well. So I'm going to go Manny Muhammad, Trevor Gooseby.
Yeah. Those are good ones. I'll go defensively with Ethan Burke. Ethan Burke is an interesting case study because, he goes to Michigan, and on his visit, Jim Harbaugh's like, "Yo, my God, you're a clone of Aiden Hutchinson. Do you mind if we test your bone density?" We tested his bone density. And they tested his bone density, and they're like, "Oh my God, you are a clone of Aiden Hutchinson." And then Texas comes in late, like really late, flips him almost on signing day. And he leads the team in sacks as a sophomore, and then gets benched through no fault of his own because Trey Moore is brought in. And so he moves from the buck end over to backing up Baron Sorrell at the strong side defensive end position. His snaps are cut. But he never loses his energy, his drive. Every time he got into a game, he made some plays. He had a pick 6, some sacks, blocked a field goal against Arizona State, had arguably the biggest defensive play of the game against A&M, drops Amari Daniels for a 3-yard loss on 4th and goal from the 1 late in the game. In a 17-7 game, if A&M scores there, it's 17-14 with 4 minutes left. This guy's hungry as all get out. And Allan Clark, the new defensive ends coach, said, "I'm so excited about this guy." And so, he's like, I'm trying to give him all the tools he needs with that 83-inch wingspan. And Allan Clark has worked with Max Crosby. I'm really excited to see what Ethan Burke is going to do for this defense. And then offensively, I'm just super intrigued by Christian Clark because we know he's put together. I probably can't get out of my mind that Tashard Choice said he has a lot of the same traits as Bijan Robinson. He's more of a jump cut, spin move guy than maybe any of the other backs in the room. And yet he's just put together. I mean, he's 6 foot, 212 pounds. He's got thighs like oak trees, quads, I should say. And so very interested to see how far Christian Clark can go. He looks comfortable coming off the Achilles repair. And there are other guys who are going to be front and center immediately. Like Emmett Mosley, I'm also very intrigued by. We heard Steve Sarkisian talk about his strong hands, his high football IQ, the fact that he ran an offense at Stanford that's similar to Texas. So he's been able to catch on more quickly than, say, Matt Golden, who came from an air raid offense at Houston, where none of the offense translated to what Texas runs. So, yeah, I think those are a couple that jump out. And Eric, what's your level? We haven't talked a lot of special teams, but Jeff Banks said that the top three guys in the return game right now, DeAndre Moore, Ryan Niblett, and Quintravian Wisner. Now, we know there's a lot of guys with speed. We know Jonah Williams wants to return punts and kicks. Your thoughts on what Jeff Banks said?
I laugh because, listen, I understand Steve Sarkisian and Jim Schlossnagle said, we will not limit Jonah Williams. But is Jonah going to go up to Sean Miller next and be like, yo, if you need a point, I got you.
I got you.
Jonah wants to do everything. So I laughed there. I don't know how you feel about this, Chip. You and I have never had this conversation. I'm not a fan of my starting tailback being the kick returner, right? I think that's from an era gone by, 15, 20 years ago, regardless of the fact that, you'll split carries. So I think Trey can be a guy that maybe gets 3, 4, 5 kick returns in the season, but I don't need him to be my primary returner. And I don't think, to be clear, I don't think Jeff was hinting at that. And Jeff did say that, hey, your starting tailback isn't going to be out there if he's, has that responsibility. But he was a name that he mentioned. I have confidence in Jeff Banks' special teams, right? We know this for a fact, Chip. When you are an excellent team, especially an excellent, defensive team, not a lot of, the kick return deal, you don't get a ton of those, right? It's more the punt return game. That is, if I had to pinpoint one facet of the return game that I am most interested in, it's punt returns, because I believe the opportunities are going to be there. We saw Silas Bolden, and God bless Silas. There were some times, and listen, it's a dangerous life back there as a punt returner. You know what you're signing up for. But sometimes you'd be like, Silas, just get away from it. Not because you're worried he's going to fumble, but it's like, man, they are bearing down on you. So we'll see what opportunities come from that. But no, I think DeAndre Moore, I think it's another way to get the ball in his hands, quite frankly. And he's shown, Chip, when he gets the ball in his hands, a level of shiftiness working out of the slot that I think is intriguing. I think Ryan Niblett, again, another guy that should be intriguing there. So if I had to pinpoint the return game, that's the one that I'm kind of most intrigued by. I'll say as a whole on teams, St. Louis, and I asked Jeff Banks about him for a reason. Lance St. Louis, always great to have a veteran snapper, because that part of the operation, that's the first step, right? I think that always gets overlooked before everything else, the punt or the kick. The first step is the snap. So you feel good there. You asked about Bo Meester being the holder. You feel good there, a veteran guy. I am confident. Everything we've heard about Mason Shipley is that he can handle it. Again, I will say this, and there's a reason I asked Jeff the question. Big difference between kicking, a 54-yarder against FIU at Bobcat Stadium or UFCU Stadium, whatever it's called now, and kicking in the SEC, right? I understand some of the traits and the intangibles you look for. You want to see if those can carry over, but it's still something to keep an eye on. So I'll be interested to see his first attempt, if he has an attempt at Ohio State, how that fares, Chip. Yeah.
And I like Mason Shipley. I like his demeanor. It's very, that's in talking to his coaches from his previous stop at Texas State, they just loved how nothing seemed to faze him. So that's a great ingredient for a kicker for sure. I thought it was interesting that Jeff Banks said, we were more of a returner-based system the last 2 years with Silas Bolden and Matt Golden, and Worthy and Jaden Blue the year before. He said, quote, "I think we're probably, we will be more of a pressure unit this year." So interesting, because I hear that and I think, okay, they're going after punts. They're going to try and block punts. And everyone was like, "Where are the block punts?" You kind of have to make a decision, because if you commit the resources up front, you're not going to have the blockers for the return guy in the back end. If you set up the return, you will have the blockers. So just something to keep in mind as we go forward here. Eric, you mentioned it. We did have a chance. Anything else football wise that you think we need to touch on before
let's get to little Sean Miller, because he did say a lot in that hour we sat with him.
Yeah. So Eric and I had a chance to with a few other reporters to sit down with Sean Miller yesterday, and I'll throw it to you, Eric, because you wrote about it. And what stood out to you in the conversation with Sean Miller?
Quickly, I will mention the injury updates, because that's probably most pertinent. Talking about Lassina Traore, the big man, spent 2 years at Long Beach State, of course, missed all of last year at Xavier with a torn ACL, suffered in October, said he is about 4 weeks away from being cleared. So you have that with Lassina, 2 weeks away. Tremont Mark is 4 weeks away. Tremont Mark, coming back from the offseason shoulder surgery, torn labrum surgery, he is about a month away from being cleared. So injury updates there. Chip, I'm curious what you made of this answer by Sean Miller, because I have been steadfast in this, and by no means am I critiquing Chris Del Conte. It is his job to push all of his programs to compete for national titles. That is his job. I'm just looking at it from a reporter's perspective. When I hear CDC say the standard at Texas is competing for national titles in basketball, men's basketball, I would respectfully say to Chris, when has that ever been the standard, right? But I understand, again, from his perspective, you have to set that in motion. I asked Sean Miller, this is a program that's been to, in my lifetime, 5 Elite Eights in 35 years. I said, I'm 34. They've been to 5. I think the last was 1990, if memory serves me correct. This is a coach, Chip.
Elite Eight.
So
I think the last one was
2023. I'm sorry if I misspoke. I apologize. I meant the last one was the Rodney Terry year. I meant in the 35-year span. So my apologies. Okay. I misspoke. Thanks, Chip, for cleaning that up, because I may have misspoke. They've been to 5 in 35 years. That's what I'm saying. To clean that up.
Yeah, starting in 1990.
In 1990, yes. And you have a coach, Chip, and Sean Miller, who, outside of John Chaney, the legendary John Chaney, has more NCAA tournament appearances and more wins than any other coach to never reach a Final Four. So you have that pairing. I asked Sean, what are the expectations at Texas? Chip, what did you make of his answer? Because I thought he answered it, quite frankly, brilliantly. He said, we're not running from the expectations. It's to play for a national title, right? And if you don't want to embrace that, you shouldn't be here. But he also said, Chip, winning a national title is the hardest thing to do, his opinion, in college sports, because of the number of teams competing, the number of teams who commit all of the resources. Notably, all the schools he mentioned, Villanova, St. Mary's, Dayton, Xavier, there's a couple others I'm forgetting there. Don't have football, right? St. John's either don't have football or don't field, FBS football teams, right? So basketball, they are all in. Those, quote unquote, Gonzagas, Creightons, those mid-majors that can, spring up and win a title. If you are in the Sweet 16, these are his words, if you're getting to Sweet 16s, getting to Elite Eights, then at least you've put yourself in the game. Like you get to the tournament and then you got the second tournament, right? Which is, all right, now we're getting down to brass tacks. That to me, Chip, says, yes, the goal is to compete for national titles, but you got to consistently reach Sweet 16s and Elite Eights to at least put yourself in position to go win a title. Chip, what says you?
Yeah, I mean, I like that. This is what I like about Chris Del Conte. He hires coaches who are hungry and have shown the capability to get to a national championship setting. Mike White, Vic Schaefer, Edric Florial, who's already won a national title at Texas. Mike White as well, obviously the incredible run in softball. And Sean Miller fits into that category of a guy who's knocked on the door, has had a lot of consistent success. He strikes me as an old school guy and is really having to adapt to the NIL transfer portal house versus NCAA settlement world of college athletics. But I think he knows what he's looking for in terms of a roster, in terms of the mindset of the player that he wants. And so I'm very intrigued to see how this team comes together. Obviously, they've got depth in the backcourt with Jordan Pope, Tremont Mark, Kendall Weaver, Simeon Wilcher, Camden Heide, and I'm leaving some out, but I like the length that they have. Dalen Swain, Lacina Traore. I mean, if you watch his highlights from Long Beach, I love this guy. He's an absolute terror on the boards, going after rebounds and blocking shots. And I think that if he's back to what he was at Long Beach, he's going to be so much fun to watch because he is not afraid of contact. He wants to be in the middle of everything. So I'm intrigued by this team. I'm really intrigued by Camden Heide. I thought he was really good at Purdue. I thought he hit some big shots in the NCAA tournament for Matt Painter. I don't know how he got away because he was a rotational player, but you could tell he was really good. And then it looked like he was about to ascend to the starting lineup at Purdue, and Sean Miller convinced him to come to Texas. So he does feel like he has some shooters. He mentioned Jordan Pope, Camden Heide, Simeon Wilcher, and Kendall Weaver. Kendall Weaver. So they're working on his confidence because he was a 40% three-point shooter when he was the freshman of the year in Conference USA?
The WAC at UT.
Oh, the WAC. Sorry, WAC at UT Arlington. So I know some Texas fans are going to hear that and go, no, but that's what good coaching does. It builds the confidence of a player to where they become a confident shooter. That's what coaching is about, right, Eric?
Chip, I was going to say real quick, I want to chime in there. I agree with you. That is a fine line to walk, right? And that is where, in my mind, and I'm not bashing Rodney Terry, but I think as a coach, you got to at least put together the roster that can allow some of those guys to develop. What I mean is this. Last year's roster, A, Kendall was hurt, but B, there was no room for him to try to grow his game, right? Whether that's outside shooting, et cetera. As a passer, it was everything's running through Trey. We just need you to do this one thing, do your role, right? And that's great. Don't get me wrong, but it doesn't really allow for expansion. So the hope is this year's roster, you have enough shooters to where if Kendall, you're not wholly reliant on man, if Kendall takes this shot, it's going to throw off everything, the rhythm of the offense. And we only got so many shots. There's so many guys. You hope there's room for him to expand. Because as you said, he was a good three-point shooter at UTA, just obviously at different levels, specifically, with the length, right? That will affect a shot for a guy who's 6'2", 6'3".
Yeah. No, I think it's going to be fun to watch this team develop. I asked him if there are some team building exercises he's trying to do because no one knows each other. It's a new coaching staff. He's pulled, Ulrich Malagi in from K-State, who returns to Texas. There's just a bunch of new faces on the coaching staff in the locker room. And he mentioned Steve Sarkisian's Culture Wednesdays, Eric.
Right.
Now, I don't think he wants to get too far into that until he gets his two foreign international players in, Louis Obiora and Declan Daru from Germany. Declan Daru probably further along than Louis Obiora, he said, from a college ready standpoint. But and those guys will be here within the next 2 weeks. But yeah, I think it's gonna be fun to watch this team develop because there's talent, and let's see how their roles take shape. All right, Eric, you ready for some take it or leave it? Everybody's favorite.
I'm always ready for some take it or leave it.
All right. Well, then let's do it. Who is serving?
And I am serving to you, Chip Brown. So I'll kick us off. Take it or leave it. Number one, offensive line depth is your biggest concern about Texas football right now. Take it or leave it.
You know what? I should say that I'm going to take this. But as of right now, I think I'm a little more concerned about the depth at quarterback. Because, Steve Sarkisian told me at SEC Media Days, I said Trey Owens separated himself to be the clear-cut number 2, and he said, no, we don't have a backup quarterback yet. And so that battle is playing out. I feel like there are enough capable players on the offensive line. Maybe I'm wrong, but I'm a little more concerned right now. I'm going to leave this and say I'm a little more concerned right now about the backup quarterback position. Eric, what say you?
That's interesting. I am going to take it. Well, listen, I've written about and talked about backup quarterback probably as much as anybody in this market. I'm gonna take it because I don't know, Chip. Listen, I understand having confidence in your guys, and I think it's well placed and warranted. But a freshman is still a freshman, an underclassman is still an underclassman, especially if they haven't played a lot of football, right? You're 1 or 2 snaps away from possibly having, call a spade a spade. Brandon Baker already hasn't played a ton. Trevor Gooseby, 3 starts, 2-3 starts. A couple snaps away from having 2 tackles with virtually no experience, right? So I'm going to take it right now, Chip. I am.
Okay. All right, take it or leave it. Number 2, Eric, Georgia should be the preseason number 1 team in college football, not Texas. Take it or leave it.
Chip, I preseason polls always feel like a crapshoot to me, but I will say this. I can understand a Georgia fan being upset and saying, hey, we beat that team twice last year. We're bringing back a quarterback who at least played a part in one of those wins, right? Still an unknown, but played a part. And, we feel that we've bolstered our roster a fair amount as well. But it doesn't offend me enough at Texas being number 1 that I think it's some egregious thing. So I'm going to leave it. If there were anyone I would make the case for, it'd be Ohio State, just because if you're doing this to my sensibilities, Chip, they're the reigning defending, while albeit a lot of players in that reigning and defending national championship team are gone. That would be the team that I think would at least make an argument for. So that's just me, Chip.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think you could put Georgia up there. You could put Ohio State up there. You could put Clemson up there. People would argue, well, Texas beat Clemson. So your argument of Ohio State or Georgia, I don't think it should be Texas, but so I'm gonna take this because I think you could say Georgia or Clemson or Ohio State, someone other than Texas. So I'll take it.
Take it or leave it. Number 3, to bring us home, it's fair to expect Trey Moore to have a season on par with David Benda, who had 61 tackles, 5 tackles for loss, 1 sack, 1 forced fumble, and 1 interception last year. Take it or leave it, Chip.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I'm going to take this because when Brad Spence transferred in from Arkansas, I felt like Brad Spence was a guy who could put up numbers on par with David Benda. Brad Spence has experience playing in the SEC at Arkansas. And then they move Trey Moore from edge to linebacker and give Brad Spence a chance to show that he can rush the passer and move him to defensive end. I think if something happened to Trey Moore, Brad Spence would be right back in the linebacker room. But yeah, I think it's fair to expect this because in my mind, I think Brad Spence was capable of putting up numbers similar to David Benda. So I'm going to take this. What say you?
I'm going to take it, Chip. I actually want to dive into the numbers and see how many snaps that position has received over the last few years. Of course, we know in today's college football, it usually is 2 linebackers, right? And even saying that, Chip, it doesn't mean that Trey Moore won't play alongside Anthony Hill, or maybe in a situation he won't play alongside Lunga Lafau, right? So I feel like the snaps are going to be there for him to get that level of production. So I'm taking it.
All right. All right, kids, there you have it. Appreciate everybody tuning in to this latest episode of the Flagship podcast. And remember, get over to horns247.com and take advantage of that 50% off annual membership right now. No better time to join the site, join the family than right now during training camp. We are breaking it down, getting you the scoop, sizing up every angle of this football team, and you don't want to miss out on any of it. So grab that offer right now while it lasts, and please like and subscribe to Horns 24/7 YouTube channel. Feel free to leave us a 5-star rating if you're feeling it, wherever you listen to your podcasts. And for Eric Henry, I am Chip Brown. We'll see you over at horns247.com. Stay safe and keep the faith.